Yeah, I'm here at Linden Lab with the great Ebbe Altberg. He is getting over cold, maybe?
I just had some chicken noodle soup
Oh,
that's
okay.
stuck in my throat.
That's the best thing for a cold. So yeah, I guess to start off, what's the state of Linden Lab and Sansar and Second Life?
We are in as always, a fascinating place. Second Life is actually doing quite well.
Mm-hmm.
Where there's a lot of positive signs in Second Life.
Mm-hmm.
We actually grew revenues last year.
Notice
The subscriber base is growing.
how much is it now?
I don't think we talk about subscriber base.
Yeah.
So, but the number of people participating in the premium subscription plan is going up.
Yeah.
It has been going up for a while. So
About 50,000, I think, by T. Shepard's estimate.
yeah, I'm not going to speak to whatever
That's
numbers those are, and I don't carry those kinds of numbers around in my head anyway. So I shouldn't say any numbers because I just don't bother carrying them around. I look at graphs and I talk about numbers, but I don't carry them around in my head.
Yeah.
We're very bullish and excited about the long-term health of Second Life. I mean, it's obviously a very hardcore, entrenched audience in there. The top things that the team are focusing on are continue the revenue growth from last year, which has a lot to do with kind of recalibrating the economic model. I've been saying this for a long time publicly to the Second Life user base that I think we've been over monetizing land, or so land ownership has been kind of hard for people so a full region pricing in that, and so we've taken steps. You get more for your money on mainland, and private regions are cheaper than they used to be, and we want to continue that process. But that means, in order for us to be a reasonable business, we have to crank it up somewhere else, right? And so whether this is subscriptions, marketplace, Linden Dollar, buy, sell, redemption, and that, so we're trying to sort of get a better equilibrium how much we monetize the hosting piece or land versus how much we monetize the GDP, if you will. So we have different, there's no virtual world ever made that has the diversity of Second Life. Between educators, health professionals, role players, time travelers, gamers,
a lot of adult content,
social, some adult content.
That's about 30% or so, right?
It's so dependent on how you slice that, because when people slice it by what's marked as an adult region, that's a completely meaningless metric. A lot of people mark their regions as adult because they want to have freedom of speech, but they're not really doing what you consider adult activities there. So it's that kind of over indexes on what people think is adult type of stuff. And what is adult anyway? Like, I live in San Francisco. Well, I work in San Francisco. I live just north here. But like, you've been on Broadway?
Yeah.
Have you seen those places there?
Oh, but the adult content we're talking about in Second Life will include some extreme stuff that would be simulated rape and cannibalism and things like that. So when you mark a land as adult, you're basically telling users you might see something that you will probably be shocked for the rest of your life.
But the fact is that a huge percentage of the land marked adult, you would never see anything like that.
Well, and if I may, a lot of the readers have said they've done that because they're worried about being penalized. So it's sort of a regulation problem.
That's a freedom of expression or whatever, or what other users decide to do there. So I think it's more of an indication of the degree of freedom they want to have, as opposed to it having to be sex related in some way, or bad behavior. I mean, sex is not a bad behavior. That's completely normal behavior. People do it on planet Earth all the time. Like, it's everywhere. Watch your TV channels. Go down to Broadway here. it's normal.
Though again, yeah, a lot of the content is so extreme, it's not even on porn sites. So that's something that's come up again and again. That
I beg to differ on what you can find on porn sites.
I can send you some links. It became a big controversy before your time, of course.
Yeah, we our job is to make sure things are done are legal
Mm-hmm.
and are healthy for the community.
Right.
And obviously people cross the line, like you see on any social platform or any
Yeah.
So. Obviously the Banhammer has to come out sometimes, but overall, it's not really a significant problem for us. So we're psyched about what the Second Life team has accomplished, and much happier with the. When I came on board I've been here 5 years now. When I came on board 5 years ago, the users were a bit angry.
Mm-hmm.
And there had been kind of a disconnect between the lab and the user base, the residents, and
a lot of turnover of the CEOs. You're the longest lasting CEO since Philip. Usually it's 2-3 years shelf life.
Yeah, well, I mean, there were some fairly obvious things we could do to mend the relationship with the users. There were some policies here that just didn't make too much sense that we fixed, and I think now the Second Life team is, I mean, it's a wonderful team of people working on Second Life. I mean, they have an extremely long average time they've spent on that team. I think it's well over 7 years for the average Second Life employee, and
a lot of new features we've seen recently.
They're getting a lot of new features through, and a lot of cool stuff right around the corner here within weeks, hopefully even more. So
in a few weeks, we're going to see some big announcements.
Well, I mean, Ebbe is right around the corner. So there's some stuff that's been worked on for a long time that's going to finally make it out and be exciting to users. But back to what I think the main priorities is rebalancing the economy so that it's more fair across all the different types of users on the platform and the different types of creators. There's certain, I would say, users or people monetizing that have been kind of under monetized, and some have been over monetized, and we're trying to get a better equilibrium. We also will focus a lot of energy on, like I said, also, and that will help us with revenue growth as well, because we can actually make the product cheaper and make more money in the process.
That'd be interesting.
So that's what we've done so far, and we're going to continue that. And we want to get user growth, and so there's a lot of effort on sort of how we acquire users, what kind of users we acquire, how we take them into the Second Life experience, how we can move retention, and ultimately move concurrency up rather than down over time. So that's our goal, and that's probably the toughest goal we have. But the team is very focused on that.
No one's been able to solve it.
So
have you considered introducing game mechanics, like a achievement system?
We're talking about that.
That's good.
We have some interesting games in Second Life, and we're talking about bringing some flavor or variant of that into the front door, so you will, so that you kind of put people on a quest or something like right off the bat to sort of pull them into the world rather than kind of drop them off. Like I sometimes say, sometimes we just drop people off at the airport and say good luck, and so kind of engage them a little more actively from the beginning, take a more active role in getting them engaged with the platform right away. And so we'll experiment. We do a lot of experiments, a lot of A/B tests of whether it's landing pages, registration flows, onboarding, the welcome island, social, like what iterations of those can we do, and introducing some game mechanics as well to test and see how that performs. It won't be it's kind of Second Life's strength and weakness. Is the strength is the incredible diversity, but that means there's so many different types of users that have so many different reasons for being there, and want so many different things. So you think of, the avatar fashion creators in that space versus world creators versus educators versus health professionals versus role players versus, so a lot of, it's a little bit kind of like dealing with policies of cities and countries that we have to deal with and find the right balance. And then there's obviously certain things that can have larger audiences as far as how it fits, that are willing to pay more money for certain things. And how do we find that balance of diversity, but at the same time being something that is highly engaging and hooks you right away? Because just like moving to another country or city, it's a lot of effort on someone to find the right community, find the right neighbors, find the right clubs, activities, and places to eat. I mean, it takes a lot of work to get comfortable and happy in a place with and your social circles. And it's same in Second Life. It takes effort, and so what can we do to sort of minimize the amount of effort it takes to sort of feel like, oh, I found my place, and I'm comfortable here now.
What sort of new audiences do you foresee pursuing?
Well, it's actually a lot of nuance there, but ultimately a lot of it comes down to testing a lot of different messaging, a lot of different channels that you can acquire through, but it's since we want to grow, it's probably going to be, call it, more mainstream users and use cases rather than sort of the more niche ones.
I see the ads you're running, they tend to look more like a Sims Online type of experience.
Yeah, and again, a lot of that comes down to what's the CTR, what's the retention, what are those things, right? And it becomes a very data-driven exercise. And you try, and a lot of people have very subjective opinion on what those should look like or what they should do, but then you have the data telling you what it actually does, that we have access to, but not everybody else. That so it's a balancing act of trying to look, feel right, but also trust the data you see.
Because we are seeing monthly actives slipping, right? It was 1 million a few years ago, then it was 900,000, now it's more in the 800,000 range.
Which is interesting because the monthly actives can be kind of a fluffy number, right? Because you can acquire users, they show up one day, they count towards your month, but what does that do for you, right? So you can actually buy yourself a higher MAU.
Exactly.
So we're actually not that excited about focusing on MAU as a core metric. We're more interested in concurrency, and that's a more real number to focus on to drive up. So the team is focused on driving up concurrency. And now, what do you need to do to drive concurrency? Well, you need to improve the conversion in the funnel, and you need to improve the retention rate of D1, D3, D7, D30. And then you start thinking about a different way of what types of users you acquire, because you might not acquire so much in bulk now, but it more targeted, which might mean the MAU goes down, the monthly active goes down, but the retention number goes up, which might actually be it becomes a more effective way to actually build your audience that way. And over time, that will then start pushing MAU up. But it's not padding MAU with sort of crap traffic that doesn't stick. And it's not like we've been trying to pad it, but it's as we get more and more scientific in how we look at all the data in all these customer acquisition funnels, and we now provide much more deep data back to the acquisition channels we're working with. You can pay for a visit, you can pay for a registration, you can pay for a sign-in, you can pay for a D3. So the further down that funnel you go, the higher you increase the quality of the users you acquire, but the lower, it might be lower numbers, it might be a lower spend, but the end result is actually better. So all those things are going on in combinations.
Related to that, I think performance is probably the key issue. Most people just cannot use Second Life unless they have a dedicated broadband and a PC, and otherwise they're going to have a lot of problems. And
the Second Life is So this gets to the third thing. So we've talked about sort of the revenue goals and and improving the economic equilibrium and user growth. And the third big effort that's underway, which is a massive effort, is to shift the whole infrastructure back end from our own hardware in a hosted facility in Phoenix all the way to AWS.
To the cloud.
So once we go to AWS, which is the whole Second Life stack is very proprietary and has a lot of custom stuff in it, and so, but the process of moving is well underway. It will take hopefully less than a year, but it's a huge effort. And
it started a few years ago, didn't it?
Well, I mean, what started a few years ago was that when we started Sansar, it went straight to AWS. So we've actually built a lot of knowledge and skill and tooling by just putting Sansar on AWS. So now that when Second Life is coming after, it has, like, some roads have been paved, but there's still a unique aspects to Second Life, like, you got to get Second Life servers to be upgraded, not just us, but the OS we run to. So that's an upgrade path to get the current infrastructure, and then the whole process of moving and deploying, which has all been a lot of custom tooling around that, gets to really be retooled, and they can leverage a lot of things that we've done for Sansar or learned from Sansar, but it's still a huge effort to move the whole thing. Once we move there, then we have more choice as in sort of the server hardware specs we run on. I think we'll get improved networking, we'll get improved server throughput. So it's hard to speculate what just the move itself will do for performance. We have some hopes that it's gonna just, that in itself is gonna be a nice bump.
Right.
And then once we're over there, because we're really just talking about moving, once you're there, you can start taking advantage of being there, which is a whole other set of things you can do for geographic distribution of infrastructure, so that people in Asia or Australia, whatever, can have ping times to the servers that are much closer to them if they want to have their server more geographically nearby them.
Right.
Or you can start thinking of all kinds of additional services and tooling that we don't have access to today outside of AWS. So there's a lot there, but a lot of the challenges, which we kind of deal with uniquely more than anybody, is just the type of freedom of user-created content we're dealing with, right?
Yeah.
And there's always a way for a user to go past the boundary.
Oh yeah.
Right? So
that was my next question, actually. So I wrote about this recently. The top 3 mesh bodies, probably about 60% of user base uses it, are horribly poorly optimized. They have way more triangles than an average AAA game. And so basically, a former Linden told me this is basically like a DDoS attack. These shapes, they're so performance intensive, and they're in the shop, and I don't know if Linden Labs ever said, look, could you guys just optimize this, because you're literally killing the world.
Well, some of it comes down to just supply and demand, right? And so if there's demand for these beautiful mesh heads or bodies, and that's why we kind of introduced the Jelly Babies concept, so that users can say, here's my tolerance for how heavy you can all be, right? And if I set it here, well, I'm not going to see your beautiful avatar that you spent all that dough creating, because I just don't want your frame rate to mess with me. The frame rate it messes with. So I'm just gonna rather see Jelly Babies, and that will hopefully create sort of a supply-demand pressure for the better quality to sort of get introduced, rather than us having to have some very strict guidelines. I mean, we can always communicate and beg and plead, but ultimately users are going to do what users are going to do, and you hope that the system kind of drives towards the right balance of performance and quality that the market wants, and that it sorts itself out. Rather than
it seems like it hasn't. Jelly Baby's been out for a few years, I think, and these mesh bodies, the high performance ones, are still very popular.
Well,
so
then the users have voted. You know? So you can't have your cake and eat it too. So they're right now it sounds like they're choosing to eat cake. Right?
Yeah. I think the inadvertent outcome is that Second Life becomes more of a solo activity, because you can go in your your skybox or whatever, and then you can load your 80,000 poly.
And
mesh.
look at yourself.
So everyone's kind of by
in
themselves.
your own private glory. Yeah. And so should we give region owners power to say what a max weight should be to enter here? There may be things we can do to. Again, I like to push as much of this control to the market rather than us being heavy-handed in what you can and cannot do.
Yeah.
And the more information and data and tools we can provide the creators and the users rather than us defining what is and is not acceptable, I think that's probably a better way to go.
Okay. Well, and back to performance, so do you think we'll be fully in the cloud by this year, Amazon?
I think by early next year.
Early next year?
Yeah, so I think I'm hoping that it's inside of a year, but I wouldn't expect us to be 100% shifted this calendar year.
Okay. And I know you're developing an iOS version, so when could we see that?
I actually don't know. I mean, we have a cool dude here cranking all day long on making a mobile companion app. We're not yet considering it being a viewer.
Right.
So it's more going to be a companion as far as you being able to stay connected to your friends and community, whether it's chat and shopping and all kinds of things, or customer service that our users want to do. It would be further out for us to consider actually a viewer for that platform, for mobile. Mm-hmm. And then again, you can start debating as to whether you want to do a viewer to run on all these operating systems, whether it's Android, iOS, what have you, or you rather stream it. And like we talked about earlier, whether it should be what's the cost of that, and is that something maybe that wouldn't be ideal for a free-to-play viewer,
right,
or a 3D viewer, but maybe a subscription 3D viewer. So it's something but for starters, where it's more of a companion than a full-fledged 3D viewer.
But you are toying with the idea of having a 3D viewer with a subscription that would be linked, for example, to the Google Cloud deployment or something like that?
I mean, we've had them before, right? Through third parties,
on
like
live.
we said, on live, and with Bright Canopy,
right?
And so we've been in that loop, and we look at the data and the cost, and so we kind of recompute this every so often to see, has the cost of cloud GPUs come down to a point where it starts to make sense. And so I love the competition that's happening between Amazon and Microsoft and Google and all these people, NVIDIA, to make cloud GPUs sort of cheaper and cheaper, and there'll be more, so the competition is great, but I haven't seen a business model yet that would sort of make free to play in our business model, because we're not an ad model.
Right.
So to have that make sense yet, but I would love for it to make sense, because that I think would give would easier for us to do it streamed rather than sort of running local, and it could provide also a better user experience, especially for something like Second Life or Sansar, which is not like such a super important Twitch millisecond shooter type of environment.
Yeah.
But yeah, we need to see the cost come down, or when we do introduce it, it would have to probably be wrapped around some sort of subscription model to cover the cost of it.
Well, one more question from a reader before I jump to Sansar. Do you think we'll see more SIM discounts or more SIM feature offerings in this year?
Well, we're definitely working on our pricing strategy. Our goal, as I've been saying, is that we want land to get cheaper, and so how we dial the different price points throughout our products, whether it's around Linden Dollars or redemption or land or subscriptions and marketplace, and we're still trying to figure out, but I'm hoping that we'll do something within a few months to sort of take another step in what the cost of land is.
Okay.
So that's
good to know.
It's being discussed heavily.
I like that as a hint of things to come. Okay, well, thinking about Sansar, so I've been looking at the concurrency on Steam, and it's pretty much in the two figures. So you got like
Yeah.
80, 90, 100.
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking small numbers still. We're still in beta. We're spending hardly any money trying to acquire users. Steam was an interesting step because actually it was not just technically doing the work, and we haven't gone like, main Steam. We're just in the early access area, because just understanding getting enough traffic from Steam users to understand how they think and what they want. So we just want to be able to read all the signals as we develop the platform so that we make the right prioritization as we go. And that's been my preference all along. Like, we could have been baking Sansar in the dark here in the lab for another couple of years probably before we went ta-da to the world. I much rather prefer to go out really early, and have enough users to just give us more insights and signals as to what works, what doesn't work. Can they create content? It's been also way more creator focused for the early part of the whole project. Can they build interesting content? What do they need to be able to create interesting content? And so being able to build a product sort of with our users is kind of the process we're taking, right? So spending a lot of time listening on Discord, talking to our users. They constantly come up for things that they would need or want to make it better, which makes us smarter. So I don't like to sort of be baking it in isolation with what you hypothesize is going to be the right thing. Put it out there and see how users react. And then over the last 6 months or so, although maybe earlier than that, but like start to think more on sort of the consumer visitor type of person that might not be a creator in any user created environment, whether it's Second Life and Sansar. The majority is not going to be heavy creator types.
No.
They're going to be consumers, socialites, visitors, players. And so what are the things you need to engage with them, and what is it our creators need to be able to engage them? And so we're just doing a trickle of these users on a constant basis. So as we tweak the product, we can look at the metrics, what needs to move, until we get to a point where we feel like, okay, now the conversion and the retention and people's feedback and engagement get to a point where it makes sense to put more juice to get people in. Because I think maybe we should have just been more heavy-handed in calling it alpha, beta, whatever. It is definitely still in beta. We're not in like some sort of post-launch mode. We're in a pre-launch mode, if you will. And so when will a launch happen? The data will tell us, right? It's not like you can necessarily just say on this date, the floodgates open and we start spending big marketing dollars or what have you to try and drive a lot of users into it. We're still, I would say, very much in the iterative test phase. We're shipping updates, larger updates every month, and we've been doing it now for 2 years, just constantly updating and adjusting our priorities as we see as this thing evolves, with the help of a lot of really some great users that are being persistently with us during this journey, who are hopeful. Some come in and go, can it do this? No, not yet. Okay, I'm out. Fine. So at some point they'll get what they want and they'll stick around. But this next release, shooting for next week, it's got a lot of goodies in it.
What's coming up?
Oh my Lord. Custom avatar. Did you see the video we shared on custom avatar?
Oh no, I haven't got it.
Okay, so you'll be able to dress custom avatars.
Okay.
Avatars in VR will move better. Feet will stick to the ground better. Grabbing, throwing objects will feel much more natural, be much easier. You'll be running PC, desktop and VR. You'll be running faster, walking faster. You can jump. So way more dynamic avatars and customization of avatars, and dressing or adding things to your avatar, and then just how you can move about within the environment. There's a huge number of upgrades. Some very early simple questing system, like we talked earlier about Second Life, so that we can take new users on some, like, go explore by finding some stuff and complete some quests. And we built it so that we can kind of keep expanding on it, and over time we want to put the questing capabilities into the hands of our creators so they can create quests or extend quests or something like that.
How's the optimization? I think that's one of the problems, is some of the even promoted regions are really huge. Like one is 18 gigs.
Yeah, so we've done a lot over time. So it wasn't that long ago that we actually started to do streaming texture load. It used to be all up front. Now you get into a scene or into a world. Now you get into a world much faster, and we continue stream texture updates after you're in already, and it's almost completely unnoticeable that it's happening over time rather than all up front. So now the complaints on how long it takes to get into a world is radically reduced. The average time to get in is much better. We're actively working on LOD systems. We don't even have LOD yet.
Okay.
So that will make a big difference in what kind of avatar concurrency numbers we can have, and the size of the worlds. We'll probably start with avatar LOD, and then proceed to environment LOD thereafter. So that's under works. Then we have a whole performance crack team that just constantly thinks of smarter ways to optimize content.
Is it fair to say it's becoming more of a PC-facing client as opposed to a VR-centric client as it was launched?
Statistically, it's always been majority PC,
right,
or desktop.
Yeah.
Right? We're like, I don't know what the exact numbers are, but like 75-25 or 80-20, whatever, of desktop versus VR. And so you'll probably see us being less like pitching it as a VR thing.
Like it was in the beginning, right?
Yeah, and that was kind of like, it was all hot and hip and interesting to talk about VR, right? So we kind of rode that a little bit, but ultimately our goal is to make it so that desktop and VR users can both enjoy Sansar, and I switch back and forth. Like I might cruise around on desktop, and then I, like, when I hang out with people, definitely put my gear on and hop in, and because it's just so much more immersive to be hanging out with people and doing stuff in VR. So all you have to do is put a headset on, you're in VR. You take it off, you're in desktop. And so we want to be equal to both of those types of users, which is a huge challenge in itself, to basically, because you have to sort of rethink a lot of user interfaces in dual. It's kind of like desktop and mobile have very different paradigms for how things work, but we want to make it so that you don't have some sort of magic advantages on one versus the other. Certainly on more of on the play side. On the create side, we dabble a little bit with VR so that you can at least look at your environment and move some stuff around, but we didn't go all out on sort of VR creation. It's definitely much more of a desktop sort of creation environment.
What do you think VR chat's doing well that all the other ones, including Sansar, is not?
Well, I think they did really well early on with just the amount of creativity around the avatars, and which allowed for some really fun role play of the types of characters they supported. But we've taken, and I don't want to diss anybody, but we've come from a place with Second Life and with Sansar that there's some core things we believe very strongly in. User-created content to the extreme. The ability for users to be able to make money on the content they make, and services. Those are really hard problems to solve.
Right.
And which is why both Second Life and Sansar has built its own stack and its own engine. Because when you get into IP protection, monetization of content, even all the way with Sansar's down, we actually support full supply chain economy. So I can buy something from you, and if you enabled it to be resold, I can package it up with something else and sell that. and you get paid when I sell my thing that includes your thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we really thought about how you can create something of massive scale, of massive amounts of user-created content. That pretty much requires a custom-built thing.
Right.
You cannot do that type of a user-created world with an off-the-shelf Unity or Unreal Engine.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to preserve backwards compatibility of all that content that Second Life has been doing for well over a decade,
right,
and you have creators selling stuff and you have users buying stuff, and users buying stuff expect that stuff to still function month after month after month. And so as we evolve the platform with new scripting capabilities, new features, new whatever, you still don't want to come out with the release where suddenly like, yeah, all that stuff doesn't work anymore. Now users get angry at the sellers for having sold them something that broke.
Right.
I liken it a little bit to, yeah, let's just change the electrical system in the US, right? Your VCR is dead now, right? Or your TV doesn't work, or your hairdryer doesn't work, like mayhem. You just can't introduce that. And if you don't have control of that stack and how you think about assets, inventory, and backwards compatibility, IP protection and those things, you just can't really solve those problems unless you take really put that into the core of your engine.
That brings up another topic, because when
which doesn't mean that that's the only way to go and make fascinating large MMOs or worlds that are exciting to people. It's just, if we're taking the approach that we believe in, you kind of have to take that path. So I think you will see a lot of fascinating worlds, whether it's VR chat or whatever, that's gonna, some of them may be huge and popular, but they're not trying to do what we're trying to do. So it's a little apples and oranges to kind of compare these kinds of things.
Fair enough. There was talk early on, I remember you said something early, that there'd be some portability of content from Second Life to Sansar. How's that coming?
Well, there already is, because if you build mesh content, which is how a lot of content is made in Second Life.
Okay, so we're talking mesh.
That user can just import it to Sansar, right? Sansar decided early on to not be the original content construction environment or editor. There's so many great third-party tools. Blender, Maya, Substance Painter, like you go on and on and on. Like, how much of that stuff do you want to try and replicate, versus just make it easy for people to use all those tools and other ones. You can use Microsoft 3D Paint, like I don't care. If it can spit out common file formats, you can suck it into Sansar and play with it and use it. So we focus more on Sansar being the layout editor. I can lay out all these assets, I can attach scripts to them, I can choose my lighting, I can choose sort of some environment things, I can attach audio to things. It's kind of like where you compose the construction of all these pieces, but you don't necessarily create the actual asset itself. Because that would just be another whole thing to go do.
Yeah. So it sounds like we don't see other portabilities such as Linden Dollars or avatar names, things like that.
Yeah, the Linden Dollars we thought quite a bit about. We didn't want Sansar to have to be constrained with certain types of backwards compatibility or business models because of how we've done things in the past. So if we had, for example, said Sansar from day one has to be able to just take a Second Life region and just run it, right? Then you might as well just go work on Second Life, right? Why would you go build Sansar? So we wanted to build Sansar, which could take advantage of a lot of modern techniques for how you create high-performing content at scale. And we also thought, should the Linden Dollar be sort of transportable between the two worlds? I mean, we kind of wanted to do that, but then we also thought, like, well, the economic model over here is different. And let's say we might have different taxation model, if you want to call it that, for what it costs to buy and sell and redeem. Maybe that's more or less on one or the other side, right? But if you could then come in this side and then go out this side, you could then circumvent the business models or kind of, see what I'm saying?
I see, yeah.
So, and that would add additional kind of, now you have to have some sort of bi-directional exchange in the middle. that might not even be one-to-one in some way. And it would just seem to add extra complexity. So maybe someday we'll let people buy Sansar dollars with Linden dollars and vice versa.
That'd be
on
interesting.
some sort of an exchange. I don't know. But we wanted Sansar to be able to sort of figure its business model out without also having to worry about what that other business model is doing, right?
Exactly.
And vice versa. So that's why we kind of made it separate. And so Sansar, I would say, is a sort of a Second Life in spirit, highly focused on user-created content, user-created worlds, user-created communities, user ability to make money, but then a lot of differences on top of that for how you build the content, how all kinds of features. Like Second Life, I mean, Sansar chose to support instancing.
Right.
So it doesn't have this sense of sort of geographic sense that Second Life has.
Yeah.
But it was also an answer to the challenge that Second Life is, like, how does a creator really scale with a world they've built? Right? When you get to 70 concurrent user in a region in Second Life, you're sort of tapping out, right? That's a coffee shop. If you create a good game or something, why can't I have tens of thousands, if not millions, of people consuming that world I built?
Right.
So that's something that Sansar can solve. I can create an interesting game or have a fascinating concert or something and be able to target a massive concurrent user base of that experience. They're not going to be in the same instance, but no.
Yeah.
MMOs don't work that way. Unless they have this very highly geographic, persistent model like Second Life does. So I think they're both unique, and I think they both have pros and cons for certain things. And but that's where Sansar kind of, in spirit, a lot of similarities, but then the implementation is different enough that it's not like a direct translation.
I do want to ask this because this comes up anytime I write about Sansar on my blog. This comes from Second Life users. Why are you taking all the money that we give you for land and plow it into Sansar, and no one's using Sansar? We're still waiting for all these updates.
No one is using a new project. That's like saying never invest in anything except for
they feel like all the profits should be plowed back into them. And
we have more people working on Second Life than we do working on Sansar.
Okay.
Right? So the budget for Second Life is bigger than it is for Sansar. So, yes.
What's the ratio, out of curiosity?
We're 200 people. I would say 130 of them or so are on Second Life.
Okay, so it's mostly plowed back into Second Life.
Yeah, now Sansar doesn't really feed itself with any revenue. So, like, yes, we could take all the revenue that comes to Second Life and put it back in Second Life. But, hey, that's why I have this job, and I got to choose and to try and create something that we thought could, or believe, can reach scale and audience, maybe a different audience, not necessarily exactly the same. I mean, you see a lot of people that I would say are called sort of virtual world travelers, right? There's a lot of people I see in Second Life and Sansar to travel all the worlds, right? VR chat to Science Space to whatever Facebook's doing, to alt space, and sample them all, and they like some for a reason or others for other reasons, and that's normal. I mean, how many different chat apps do you use? Right? They're all kind of have between Discord and Messenger and WeChat and I end up using and Slack. I end up using 5 or 6 of them depending on context and
exactly.
purpose. So and there will be some things you can do in Second Life that Second Life is ultimately freaking great at that Sansar won't necessarily become better at.
Right.
That's fine. There's some things Sansar can do that Second Life can't do.
Right.
Fine. Right? So it's not like it's one size fits all in some way. And Second Life has an audience that peaked just over 1 million and is now below $1 million, and
Mm-hmm.
what would it take to build a platform that could, if executed properly with the right strategy, have tens of millions or hundreds of millions of people on it. And then that's why a lot of the approach we took to Sansar has been different in a more. We still have to prove that degree of success, but I think it's definitely worth a shot, because I think it's possible. And so, like I said, I have, I think, two beautiful products, Second Life and Sansar. I love them both for different reasons, and we're investing in both. And I would love nothing more than that both of them become extremely successful for a long, long, long time. I never thought of Sansar personally as like 2.0, that somehow is going to force migrate Second Life users or something, because we didn't intend to build something that was exactly the same, but very similar in spirit.
Great. That's a great place to wrap it up. Well, thank you very much, Ebbe. Been very fascinating.